Hey guys, we're looking at a Fuji commuter style electric bike today. This is called the E-Traverse Classic Plus, and it comes in 8 different sizes if you count the step-through version, which is sort of a mid-step. This bike, it balances price, $27.99, with quality and performance and comfort, really. So we're getting the Bosch Active Line motor down here. It's a little less powerful than the Performance Line Cruise or the Performance Line CX, even the Performance Line Speed. All those Performance Line motors are 63 Newton meters or 75 if you get the CX. It's kind of a mountain biking motor. The Active Line is 50 or 48 Newton meters, depending on if it has a derailleur or an internally geared hub setup. So this has a derailleur, 50 Newton meter peak output. That's still great, in my opinion. Plenty for getting around town, climbing up hills and stuff. It's going to use the energy in the battery pack probably a little bit more efficiently because it's not quite as zippy. It's a smoother feel. It's slower to accelerate, but not a whole lot slower. I think it's a great choice for a bike like this, frankly, especially at that price point. And you look at the rest of the bike, we've got a SR Suntour NEX suspension fork with speed lock, and it's cheap, right? It's just like nice that it has lockout, but I think it's 63 millimeter travel right there. 9 millimeter skewer, so it's not a through axle like you'd have on a Mountain View, like you'd have on a mountain bike. I'm near Mountain View, that's why I said that. Same in the rear, 9 millimeter quick release. So we've got quick release on both of the wheels. That's nice for doing service on the go, but no quick release on the seat tube. So I wanted to straighten this out because this bike, you can see that the saddle's a little bit angled, and even the display, it's kind of down. I wanted to straighten these out. This is over tightened, so I can't get it forward and back, and the saddle's not aligned, and that's not really Fuji's fault. I mean, you know, these are probably being imported. I haven't seen them a lot in the United States yet, but Fuji's a bigger brand. Shout out and thank you to Moto Strano that's letting me review this. I think they probably just put it together quickly because I told them I was coming, and I didn't spend the extra time with a tool before this because I'm trying to pack in as many bikes as possible before I head out. So coming back to where did they cut costs to hit that $27.99 price point? Well, these tires don't have reflective sidewall stripes. That's something that I really appreciate, you know, especially if you have a darker colored bike. But in this case with the silver, I think you're going to have a good visual footprint from the side. And at least it has integrated lights. So this light, it's interesting to see it right here. I think they put it on the left seat stay because it does have provisions for adding a rear rack. So this would be a great setup for turning into a commuter, as I mentioned before. But it doesn't come stock with a rack. It does come stock with these SKS plastic fenders, and they do have a couple of support arms, so they really don't rattle as much as some of the other plastic ones I see. Plastic is really resilient. Compared to aluminum, it's not going to dent. Compared to steel, it's not going to rust. Relatively lightweight. We'll go for a ride later and you can see, you know, whether you think that they make any noise or not. And then we've got an AXA Blue Line 30 LED headlight with reflectors. So they've got some reflective qualities going on, standard reflectors as well. You've got a silver frame that stands out, beautifully integrated cabling so it stays out of the way, it won't snag, and it just looks nice. It's a purpose-built electric bike, clearly with that Bosch motor mounted to the bottom bracket area down there. They have to do that custom. But again, the tires, I don't know what Vera, I haven't seen these as much. I don't know if that's like a Fuji specific line, but they're 28 by 1 5/8 by 1 1/2. And 28 is talking about the tire diameter. And then I think 1 5/8 might be like thickness this way, and 1 1/2 inches might be thickness this way. So they're decent. You can see they even have a little bit of tread. These are go anywhere city tires. It's not just smooth for perfectly paved sidewalks and streets. It's like a little bit of pack trails and stuff too. A little bit thicker, going to give you some comfort along with that suspension fork. And then this saddle, I'd say this is fairly active, but I love the ergonomic grips. These are locking oval. That's, I think, one of the Fuji brands as well. You can see it again on the stem. You can see it on the handlebar and the seat post. 30.9 millimeter diameter, so you could swap that out and get a seat post suspension. Just keep in mind it adds about 3 inches. So if you got a Thudbuster, a Body Float, an SR Suntour NCX suspension post, those are all great. It just raises your saddle height, and for some people you want to be able to keep your butt on the saddle and put a foot down. at stop signs and stoplights, and that's just going to raise this a little bit. It's probably most relevant for that mid-step design I was talking about when you might be dealing with someone with a shorter inseam. 175 millimeter cranks, Welgo aluminum alloy platform pedals with nubs. These are great, especially if you live somewhere where you need those fenders, it gets wet. They're just not as slippery, and they give you a great surface area for bigger feet. I am on one of the larger frames right now, 21 inches. It's not the largest. This is sort of an every person's electric bike, the kind of bike that you could get and ride to work with or to school or whatever. I think it blends in really well. The weight is low, centrally mounted. It's exactly what you want. We're dealing with the Powerpack 400 here. This is 36 volts, 11 amp hours for 396 watt hours, almost 400. Relatively lightweight. It's like 5.6 pounds. It's easy to take off and take with you. Got the keys right here. Just insert, twist, and then lift. And I love that it has this handle built in along with a metal edge there, so people won't be able to just pull really hard and break it off your bike. These are fairly expensive. This is one of the most expensive and sensitive parts of the bike. You really don't want to drop this, and I recommend storing it in a cool, dry location versus outside where it's really hot, or maybe a garage, because the heat can degrade it, and extreme cold can as well. So that's the battery pack. It does have a little LED charge level indicator on the left-hand side, which is nice. So if you had this at your desk and you're like, oh, did I charge it yet? You can see quickly just by pressing that. And then here is the charging port on the side of the bike. It matches the charging port on the base of the battery. Bosch has a couple of charger designs. One is their compact charger. It only puts out 2 amps versus their full-size fast charger puts out 4 amps. They're 1.1 pounds to 1.7 pounds. So there's a little bit of a difference weight-wise. Of course, I love the faster charger, but on a cheaper bike like this, you might get the compact. And I can't say for sure I wasn't able to get that charger before the review. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull the key out. So I put it in the lock position, and then I'm going to make sure that I push down. There we go, and it clicked. This is actually maybe a little bit loose. You can have your shop double check it before you purchase. But in my experience, this is very reliable. Same with the motor. They're some of the longest lasting, like least service type of electric drive systems I've seen out there. And the drivetrain on the bike is actually pretty nice too. I believe this is 15 teeth up here on the chain ring. And then in the back we have Shimano Deore 9 speeds, 11 to 36. That's plenty of range. Shimano Deore's good. It's kind of like mid-level stuff. And for a bike that you're just getting around town, 9 gears is plenty to go from climbing to then hitting and even exceeding the 20 mile per hour assisted speed. I talked about the display being removable, so let's do that. So there's a little tab on the back, and then it just slides up and off. There is a little battery in this thing, so if your display ever stops, maybe after a couple years of use, you can replace the display or maybe even get another cell to put in there. There's little screws around the edges. Micro USB charging port right there, so you can actually connect your phone or another portable electronic device and pull power from that big battery pack. It's actually really neat, and this is the only display panel in the United States right now from Bosch that does this. They have a smaller one called Purion that looks a lot like this button pad, but it has a little LCD built in, and it doesn't have a working micro USB port. So anyway, it's back on. I'm going to press the power button. It boots up extremely quickly. Shows your battery, assist level, speed, and then a bunch of trip stats down here. So if I press the I button or over here, we go from max speed to average speed, trip time. Range is really cool. As I arrow up using the plus button, go from off to eco, it says, hey, we can go 17 miles. This battery is not, it's hardly full. So that's a really low range. I'd estimate, 25, 30 miles to 65, 70 miles. It really depends, but with efficient, larger diameter wheels and tires and concrete environments, this could be a longer range bike, even though it does have the sort of standard size Bosch Powerpack 400. Bosch does have a new Powerpack 500, 25% larger capacity. It is forward compatible, so you could actually buy that battery, upgrade to it, but it might not have this gray casing that you see here or those stickers. In fact, it won't. So, same with this display up here. It's interesting to see the gray. Usually this is black, but I guess Fuji got set up with some different colors to match their silver frame. And then let's see if walk mode works. It's not always active. It's that little button on top there we go, walk assist. And then if I hold plus, that's it. So imagine that you've got a rack set up with a bunch of gear, or maybe you're going through a crowded place, or you're walking the bike up a hill. At 47 pounds, I mean, it's not that heavy compared to a lot of other electric bikes, but it's still not light. So it's nice to have some of those little extras in working order. And then there's those locking ergonomic grips I was talking about. 2-finger adjustable length hydraulic levers. So if you have smaller hands, you can bring those in a little bit, make them easier to reach, or maybe you're riding with gloves for part of the year, bring them in a little bit. Really easy to do. There's a little set screw in there you can adjust. Hydraulic disc brakes are very easy to actuate. They don't require as much hand strength. And then we've got 160 millimeter rotors front and rear, which is fine for this type of application, in my opinion. You know, mountain bikes and stuff have 180, sometimes even 200, but for city riding, this is great. And Tektro makes decent stuff. These are 2-piston calipers. I guess, you know, I'm kind of rationalizing this. This is more the stuff that's like, meh, you know, good enough. I like that they have a kickstand and that it's rear mounted out of the way of that left crank arm. You can stow this thing, it stays relatively out of the way, and it's even adjustable length there, so you can make it taller or shorter depending on your situation. Perhaps you're parking on unlevel terrain. It's really quick and easy to do. I talked about the motor early on in this conversation, but I want to reiterate, you know, what it's measuring and how it works. There's a little sensor here that listens for this magnet. So that's rear wheel speed. Inside that motor casing, it's listening for pedal cadence and pedal torque. It's measuring all 3 of those signals 1,000 times per second. It's really responsive. And again, it's spinning a chain ring that you cannot see because of this heavy plastic chain cover 2.5 times for every crank revolution. So there is a little bit of drag. If you're not power the bike on, there's a gearbox in there that's converting your pedal motion into 2.5 rotations. Some people seem to notice that and, you know, can get really finicky, like, oh, what's happening? In my experience, these bikes ride just fine. If you have them powered on, if you don't have them powered on, it's really reliable. The smaller chain ring seems to be very responsive and quick when the bike is turned on. And I've been told by Bosch that the smaller chain ring gives you even better chain retention, so it really grabs on. Maybe you're not going to drop the chain quite as much if you're going over bumpy terrain. With a bike like this, where you might be wearing a suit and heading to work, or a dress if you get the step-through design, it's nice to have a chain cover that extends a little bit. It doesn't need to go all the way back. And I think they do have a plastic slap guard here too, so the chain, it might hit this chainstay occasionally when you're on bumpy terrain at high speed, but at least you're not going to hit the chain. You're not going to get snags. You're not going to get dirty. I kind of wish more bikes had something like this. It's the perfect size. It blends in. It looks great. Same with the motor casing. Back to that gray. This is a good looking bike, even though the motor isn't quite as integrated and tipped and small as some of the other systems. I look at like the Shimano step system. It's a little bit lighter weight, a little bit quieter, but it's not as powerful or responsive in my experience. I also just like the Bosch display panel a little bit better. It has that micro USB port. So for me, there are a lot of reasons why this Fuji would be a great choice. And again, the price I think is right. The weight's pretty good. It's not the most exciting bike in the world compared to some of these other crazy mountain bikes and stuff I look at, but I think they've done a lot right. So some of the other things I noticed, 1.125" straight steerer tube. It does have sealed cartridge bearings, so if it's wet and stuff, that's not going to get maybe worn out or squeaky as much over time. Appreciate that. There's a little window on the Altis trigger shifter so you can see which gear you're in. But this is not a two-way lever, so I can't push forward. I can only pull back. Not a big deal, but that's something that they upsell on, like the Deore XT, whatever, trigger shifters. I think it comes with this little bell. And again, those lights, even though they seem a little bit exposed to me, they do work pretty well. And they're not going to be as easy to steal because they're like built onto the bike. Someone would have to, yeah, I mean, it just takes more work than adding your own little rubber one. And if you add that rack, hopefully this won't be blocked unless you have a left pannier. So keep that in mind. You might want to have a right pannier or a trunk bag, but this is going to stay mostly out of the way. If this did come with a rack, they might have the light way back here, and that'd be a nice upgrade, but it might cost more too. So in many ways, this is a feature-complete electric bike. There's a lot to appreciate on it. I'm going to go ahead and just take off here, take it all the way up to turbo mode to get the most feedback and sound for you. Got some steps. Walk it down and listen for those fenders. not bad. I could actually hear the chain slapping the right chainstay and maybe a little bit of kickstand bounce, but the fender stayed really quiet. Okay, I'm gonna start off again. Much quieter than the CX motor that I usually test, at least especially lately. Motostrano has a lot of mountain bikes. This is one of their few like commuter models. And I think this larger size hasn't sold because a lot of people have been getting the smaller ones, the step-through design. Pretty easy to reach our top speed. And then the motor just fades out. And you really notice it because when you're pedaling this bike without assist, you feel the wind, you feel just a little bit of drag, and it's not the motor dragging you, that none of that's really slowing you down. It's just that you're not getting the assistance. And again, the suspension helps, but it's just kind of like, good enough. Okay guys, I'm in the highest level of assist. I'm in the second to lowest gear. I'm just gonna start off, shift through the gears, keep an eye on the chain, listen to that motor, see how shifting sounds, just give you a close-up view. Might have heard a little bit of like sounding stuff, and I think that's the hydraulic brake line up here. It should be zip tied to the left fork arm right there, so that's fine. And again, it comes back to maybe this bike being set up quickly. I really appreciate Motostrano helping out, and I think most of the other bikes I've looked at their shop have been set up really well. That's not a reflection on Fuji. I think it's just that we're a little bit rushed today. So. And I kind of maxed out the RPM right there. I'm in a lower gear, pedaling pretty fast, and once you get to 120 RPM on those crank arms, the motor just kind of stops. That's as high as it can go. That's when you need to shift up. And there's actually a little shift recommendation arrow on the display panel right next to that battery infographic. So the bike's trying to help you. It's saying, oh, shift up to make the motor as efficient as it can be, or shift down because it's struggling. It's not being able to spin fast enough to get a mechanical advantage. It also has shift detection. So what that is apparently is these little kind of gaps when the motor's assisting, and that allows the chain to go from one sprocket to the next without just forcing it. So it's designed to make shifting a little bit smoother and produce less wear for the chain, the sprockets, and the derailleur. I think that's about it. That's the Fuji E-Traverse. This is the Classic Plus. They also have the Classic Plus step-through. I've measured this frame. Unfortunately, I don't have the other one, so I can't tell you about the standover height on that or anything, but I hope this helps you at least a little bit. Feel free to chime in the comments. You can get all those measurements back at ElectricBikeReview.com. Have fun out there. Ride safe.